represent about 35 contemporary artists in and around Calgary and across Canada.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 18th Avenue Podcast.com. Today is a very special episode. I know I say that quite often, but I'm extremely honored to be here and sitting with these amazing folks. And I know currently none of you actually know who I'm speaking about, but today joining me here is my very special guest,
Romana Kaspar-Kraft
and
Francis Willey.
So to give you all a little bit of a background, we're going to start with Romana first. Romana owns a beautiful art gallery right here in Inglewood, Calgary. If you've never been here, or if you've stayed here for any amount of time and you are fascinated by art, even if you're just a student, this is most certainly one of the places you probably already heard about it, so I don't have to sell it to you so much. It is absolutely beautiful. I came here, I was completely blown away and taken aback by what I've seen. And so, as you all know, this podcast is really to create a platform, a space where local business owners can come and talk about who they are, where they're from, and the things that connect each and every one of us, which is ultimately our stories. I'd like to thank you, Romana, for being here on this platform. I'm so grateful to have you. And my next guest is Mr. Francis Willey. He's one of Canada's most renowned photographer, and I was on his website and I seen his work. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go on there and just look at the type of photography and the type of work that he does. He is absolutely the master at his craft. I don't need to sell him. This is an easy one for me because he has been published in so many magazines, including Vogue magazines, had international travel. So once again, in fact, all the work that you see around us here are all his work. And today is a very special time for him. And I'd like to thank you so much for being on this platform and giving me the opportunity to sit down with you all and have this conversation. Welcome to 18th Avenue Podcast.com.
Thank you so much for doing this for us. We're honored to be part of your podcast.
Yeah, I feel quite honored to have this moment. I look at time as we have to pay more attention to the exact moment we're in and appreciate as we're moving through it than reflecting so much on the past or what we need to do ahead of our time. And right now, I'm just very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Francis. You wanted to start with something.
I'd like to do a land acknowledgement before we begin.
Go ahead.
I want to acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 7 territory, the original home of the Blackfoot Confederacy. I want to recognize the original caretakers and our relationship to the land, not only as a small act of reconciliation, but also as a way to contemplate my practice and role in the city and respect to the history, the languages and culture of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and First People of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our community and my art.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Let's start there. I like to start with typically where the conversation comes from. Let's start right there. Why is this important to you?
Well, I mean, the land that this podcast is occurring is treaty land and I think we have to respect all the territories and the people of those territories. And that's part of the reconciliation of it. And I felt that it was very, very important also to represent in the art exhibit itself, not only for Black History Month, which I think it should be Black forever and on and on. It shouldn't be 1 month, but it gives people time to be educated and to share and discuss, but to represent BIPOC artists, Black, Indigenous, and people of color also in an exhibition in Calgary. And I come from a multitude of backgrounds and cultures, but I want to have a deep respect for all culture in the world. And when I think about where I've made my art and the land that I'm actually standing on when I'm taking a photograph, or the individual that's in front of my lens, I want to hold them in a deep, deep regard and a huge appreciation, because I want to make it iconic, and I want I want to leave impact and have that image inspire other artists after I'm no longer here.
That is profound. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to turn to Romana now. Thank you. We've been talking, and I feel like I've come to know you because you've opened your heart up to me, and so many things that conversation we've had in the last few days, or in the short time of just knowing you.
Yes.
So I want to say that I do appreciate it. Let's start somewhere with you. I think. Give me a little bit of your background and where you're from.
So I was born in the Czech Republic, and just before I turned 4 years old, my parents immigrated to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And about 28 years ago, I moved from Toronto to Calgary. Now, my background, I grew up with a arts background. My parents had a gallery in Toronto for over 35 years. Mm-hmm. So ever since I was a little girl, I worked in the business. I got to meet lots of very interesting, fascinating people, artists of all kinds. And it just became a part of my life. My father started a gallery in the early mid 70s, and he understood European art incredibly. He collected, and not just paintings and sculptures and drawings and watercolors, but antiques and silver and porcelain and china. And he was a very worldly man in terms of his knowledge base, but one thing he never knew a lot about was Canadian art. So it was coming to Canada, it was a real eye-opener for him to learn about Canadian art and things. And I think we discussed a story of actually how he got into Canadian art.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Yeah, do you want me to go on?
Yes, please, elaborate on that.
So my dad, when we first came to Canada, some of the things he would do is he would go to antique stores and auctions and pick up little pieces that he found and discovered. And a lot of the people didn't understand European art. So he would come across something and he'd recognize the artist's name or something. And I remember one time he was telling me about the story where he was at an auction, mm-hmm. and there were two small watercolors that he found quite fascinating. One of them in particular, he recognized who the artist was. And he said, well, I can make a little bit of something on the side on that, mm-hmm. if I frame it up nicely, and I know who would be interested in this. So he thought, well, they come as a pair. How much can I pay for it? And at the time, he says, well, max $12 or $13. He ended up getting it for $12, and he got them both home. He took the first one out of the frame and reframed it and sold that. And, he thought, okay, so I made my money back plus a little extra on that one. I should open up the other and see what I can find out about this artist. So he took it apart, and when he opened it up and took the watercolor out of the frame, he realized that it had actually been signed, but the watercolor had fallen, the signature had hidden behind the mat. Mm-hmm. And he said, M.E. Carr. Now, I know there's a very famous artist, Emily Carr, but I've never heard of M.E. Carr. Mm. And so he did a little research, and he found out that Emily Carr had been signed her work, M.E. Carr. And he knew that there was a dealer out in Vancouver that had dealt in Emily cars. So he picked up the phone and he called them up and said to them, I have this Emily car, and I know that you have some clients for it. Are you interested? And the gentleman said, oh, yes, describe it to me. Tell me what it looks like and how much you want for it. So my dad's thinking, well, I paid $12. It cost me X amount to get a molding and mat on it. And, well, maybe give me $17.50 or something. Mm-hmm. And so the guy said, so wrap it up for me, ship it out my way, and I'll send you a check. And in those days, it was just very common for those types of dealings to happen, right? Mm. You trusted people you were dealing with. And so my dad wrapped it up, sent it off, and a few days later, he got a check, and he was expecting it to be for $17.50, and it was $1,750.
Wow.
And so he said to himself, well, I better get into Canadian art and learn more about it. So that's how he started dealing more in Canadian art and getting to know more Canadian artists and dealing with works like the Group of Seven and their contemporaries, plus representing a large body of other contemporary Canadian artists.
That is so beautiful. And I also want to clarify something. You identified as a native man, indigenous. How do you identify?
Well, my mother is part indigenous.
Okay.
And I also have Scottish and Irish and some European as well. But I've been learning more about my background because my family has always been kind of distant and have not shared great information with me. I wouldn't say I'm full indigenous or anything like that, but just a small piece. My mom and her family more. But it's part of me acknowledging and part of my own personal reconciliation and everything, right? I just think we need a better world. And I think that we should explore ourselves and immerse ourselves in other cultures. Like whenever I would traverse, say when I went to India or I went to Nepal or where I go, I didn't want to be a tourist. I wanted to be a traveler and to get to know families in small villages or spend time with people and become friends with the people there, and then also celebrate cultural or religious holidays or whatever the best I could if I was invited. I didn't seek that. I would just embrace it if I was invited. Mm-hmm. And I just think that we can learn more about breaking down barriers and expanding the love for each other if we open our hearts to each other culturally, and it'll enrich our lives.
I couldn't agree more with you. But I have a question for the both of you. I mean, you come from an immigrant background as much as myself sitting here, and you too have a trace of that in you as well. But do you think that the world is ready for where we want to go in terms of the things that us common people, I consider myself a common man, has been asking for like so long? Mm-hmm. Is the world now at a stage where they're ready for that, to say, let's make this place a better world, for all of us to have this right and respect to move around as we please and not feel like we're being constantly looked at or being judged?
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question. I think there are people out there, but I think it really starts with education, to educate people. And I grew up with no preconceived notions of judgment on people. And I think if that's the way you grow up, then you don't it doesn't even occur to you that sometimes other people look at things differently. Which in some ways is sad, and because you want to be aware that others do. But at the same time, it allowed me to just feel everybody should be treated equally with the equal amount of respect and courtesy and acknowledgement. And so for me, it's something that really is about education. And are we, really ready for this? I think there's always going to be judgment out there at some level, and you just have to learn to teach people that judgment isn't right in that way.
Yeah.
And if we can get people to have the confidence to stand up to issues they feel strongly about in terms of acceptance and acknowledgement, then that's a good step in the right direction. It's not the only step, but it's a good step, I feel.
Thank you so much for answering. And Dr. Willey, I'll give you...
I think that we're all product of a certain environment, how we're raised. If you're an orphan and you're moving around from orphanages, or you have brothers and sisters, or you're an individual child, or where your family traversed from and traveled to, and the friendships that you nurture when you're younger and how you're nurtured. And I think these things it's part of your environment where you begin. And then you have to redesign a new environment if that environment is toxic, or you learn from that and then you transcend that. And then I think compassion is one of the keys of transformative love, right? And communication and education, just like was discussed, right? But education is gigantic, but we live in such a fast-paced society that we're scrolling so fast. And we're reading less. Some people are reading more. I don't want to discount saying that, I think it varies per person, but I think we're so inundated with information that we're losing touch with deeper consciousness and love, right? And education. But there is a plethora of education out there. And there's the ability to be educated on a much wider spectrum than going to a library and pulling one book off the shelf. When I was young, I'd have to go to a library to learn something, or I'd have to go have nature be my teacher, or learn through friends and family, or learn on your own experience, right? So that's what I would say.
No, yeah, I think it's fascinating. We do live in a very interesting time, and I fully I connect with what you're saying. I think there is this divide, both from, we have the media on one side, and we have the general public, then we have people in the middle. So there's this, and this gap continues to widen in our society. And my hope is, and part of the reason why I started this podcast and to have this conversation, is to somewhat figure out a way to close this gap, because really we're all interconnected. And I say that all the time, is that we're all interconnected one way or the other. Somebody maybe knows somebody I know, and this is so on and so forth. And that's how this life goes. We're going to switch the conversation now, unless you guys wanted to add more to that, but we can switch the conversation and move on to your passion and why we're here. Sounds good?
Sounds great.
Sounds great.
All right.
I'm ready for it.
Okay. So, let me start with Francis. You are a photographer. Tell us about your photography journey and how you guys started into this.
So when I was very young, my mother would take Polaroids, and she had a passion for photography and writing poetry. And my grandmother on my father's side took Polaroids. And sometimes in a family photo setting or whatever, my mom would hand me a camera to take over, or I would just be in the photograph. And then when I was 12, my mom gave me a camera while we were traveling. We went up to Peace River when I was young and visit friends and family. I think my father was thinking of moving there. He moved a lot through Alberta at certain points because of work. So I've lived throughout different parts of Alberta. And I took some photos, and then in junior high school, I took a class, photography. It was either it was like this industrial arts. You could do mechanics, or you could do photography, or you could do cooking. And I thought, I'll do photography. So I learned initially how to use a darkroom. But it seemed like I was the only one in the darkroom that wanted to do work, because it was teenagers and no one really would want to work on projects. Some kids would be making out in the darkroom, or just not doing their projects. And I would go out, you would get a camera from the school and you'd go out and take photos, and I would convince one of my friends to be in a photo or whatever. And then I left photography for a long time and did collage and got into writing poetry and just explored poetry for a long while. And then one day I went to a yard sale and just found a little point and shoot camera and started working with it, and realized I really fell in love with that art form again. And I processed some pictures, and I was really happy with what I created. And then a couple of my friends were into photography, but not as passionately as I was. And one of them was getting a fancier camera, and they said, here, you want this piece of junk that they had that they didn't really care about. And I used it was more of a mechanical camera than just a fixed focal length camera. Mm-hmm. And I would, I was teaching myself a little more about photography. So as I went along, I would teach myself about light. I would write a little bit about lighting situations. And I didn't traditionally use a light meter or anything like that, or pick up a book and read. I just felt that, like I said earlier, about nature being my teacher, it was just like the experience itself would take me along the way, because I just felt like the more art and the more images I would take, I would just get better. And then eventually I had an art show, and people were so moved by the images I showed. And I put a lot of work into this art show. I lived in a very old house, a Victorian house, and I didn't have money for frames or anything. So I had to print my photos myself, and then I had to get some printed in a lab because I didn't do color photography myself. And I had to get a mat cutter and a glass cutter and figure out how to cut my own mats, my own glass. And I took old fruit crates out of the basement and made my own frames, and went to garage sales and would repaint frames. And I worked really hard putting this show together, but I ended up having so many people in the exhibit that I sold everything. But the thing that was most powerful to me is I had moments where people didn't know I was the artist, and I was just in the room when it was crowded and people would talk about the art, and I felt really touched by what they felt about the work, where they were sharing stories about their lives with each other, about an image, and it had sparked something in them, like an emotional dialogue. And I became hooked. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be an artist. This is my destiny, I think. And then once I embraced it, I never went back. I never looked back. I just continued with it. And then more opportunities arose and other things happened. You have like ups and downs in your life, right? And you go through different transitions and things. But yeah, so I just went along with it and here I am today after it's like 30 years.
It's so amazing. I want to touch up on that, but I'm going to go to Romana. Romana, tell me about your experience, your journey opening this art gallery.
So, as I mentioned, I grew up in an art gallery business, but I never wanted to necessarily have an art gallery. Initially, my feeling was that I wanted to do something on my own. Mm-hmm. And I studied art and history and art and design in England for 5 years. And when I came back to Canada, I told my parents, can I work in the gallery for a little while until I figure out where I want to leave my mark? Mm-hmm. And so 5 years later, I was still there. And at that time, I had met my husband, and he was from Calgary, and I ended up moving here and putting on some art shows. I went off I love to learn and to experience and things. So I took some courses at University of Calgary, at Mount Royal University, and put on art shows and things. And I realized that I loved that aspect of it, dealing with people, experiencing art and feeling the emotions and what art means to people, learning about what art means to people and stuff. So I did a little bit more research and found a place on 17th Avenue right across from Mount Royal Village and decided I was going to open up a permanent location of an art gallery. And was there at that location for 10 years. And then after that, we were able to buy this building and move here. And that's been going on almost 17 years now. And I can't imagine doing anything else. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. I love the people I meet. And it's so rewarding to see the diversity and the creativity of what we have here.
You are both into pretty much the same field. It's very identical. It's the people, you do these things for people, mm-hmm. to touch their heart, mm-hmm. to touch their soul, so that they have some experience or that they can relate to it. In your years of you having an art gallery and you being a photographer, what was the one thing that, I know you mentioned this earlier, but what was the one thing that when it happened, that very moment, you said, I can do this. I can do this for the rest of my life. And I would not look back at anything else.
When was that one moment? Gee, I don't know if there was the one moment, but it's something that constantly reinforces. When I see an image that just strikes something within me, an emotion. And for me, and we talked about this before, for me, art is good literature for the eyes. Mm-hmm. It's about discovery. It's about learning. It could be haunting. It could be captivating. It could be sorrowful. But it creates something in a reaction in a person. And to me, that's what art is about, to create that emotion, that dialogue, that communication. And I can't imagine my life without that. And when you meet people and they react to something you have on your wall or something an artist has created, it warms my heart.
Yeah.
So is there one time, one specific moment? It's a series of continuous moments. I can't really put it into one specific thing, but I know that the more I do it, the more I can not imagine not doing it.
Yeah. And for instance, you mentioned that when you had your first exhibit, being in the crowd and people not realizing whom the artist was or whom the photographer was, mm-hmm. there were things that were said then that transpired in your life that changed your life forever, that made you feel like you could really do this? What were some of those things that were said?
Well, sometimes people would see something, because we all have our own stories and we're all storytellers. And I wanted to evoke in the images kind of like a narrative that would be different for everyone, right? So they would wonder, who is this individual, or why did he or she or they photograph this or create this, or artist creating whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. What was going through the artist's mind. But when I saw people sharing happiness with one another or being touched on some level, that's what made me realize that I could somehow, maybe one day, if I keep working at this, I could make the world a better place by not only documenting people that I think are important storytellers or artists or just incredible minds, which is an honor for me to photograph everyone that I have. It can take the person somewhere else, and to leave like an emblazoned image in the mind, right? Or it's like people do selfies today, and are always like, so many creators or influencers are just doing, this is the narrative of their life continuously. But when I was doing photography, things were a little more special. Like if you did a self-portrait, you took a lot of time to decide, how would I do this? Or if you were taking a photo of an individual, especially with film, you wanted it to be really represent that individual that writes the poetry, that makes the music, that can sing and make people cry, or whatever it may be. And then sometimes having a vision behind it to transform that individual into another level, another realm of art beyond themselves, where they see themselves as like a masterpiece of something else. Mm-hmm. And it helps on both ways redesign thinking and inspiration and transcend to another level. And art is one of those things that they say, art takes you to a place and music that is close to like aspect of a deep religious experience, right? Or an emotional experience is when you can hear a song and it transforms or heals you, or you see a piece of work that you sit with for a long period of time and you remember someone you loved or had lost, or you find yourself, the artist's voices made you a better person or helped a moment of realization.
Is that how you go about selecting your subjects?
Often the subjects select me. It's kind of weird. It's sort of they'll contact me, or someone will enter my life randomly. I think in our life, the things that we're supposed to do are closest to us, not far away. The things that will bring us great joy and success and happiness is not something you strive to find. You have to find it in your daily, the closest to where you are, in my opinion. Sometimes we do have to travel to find a greater depth or realization and to expand your soul and your heart. But many of the individuals just enter my life randomly for a reason. And I can't explain it. It's sort of, it just happens. Sort of like sometimes the images happen from a dream. Like I'll have a dream and I'm guided by the dream, or I'm inspired by a piece of poetry that I'm writing, or I hear a piece of music, or something will flash before me, like something will happen that I find that things that are happening in the world today is very powerful. And sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't be doing this type of photography. Maybe I should be out there documenting serious issues that are happening in the world, and more of a reportage, or doing more street photography, which I do once in a while. But I'd rather put that into poetry or drawing. There's another artist that has a bigger voice for that than me. And I feel that the gift I got from my mother or from whoever within my family many generations before is when I look into people's eyes, I don't just see the catchlight reflection of light, I see the soul that shines inside of them. And then in that moment, I'll take a photograph. I get a mad rush. I almost feel like I'm going to fall to the floor, like I feel like I've accomplished something.
You answer my follow-up question on that, which was, how do you feel when you photograph someone? But I think you answer that. Romana, running an art gallery, running any business, in fact, it's a huge responsibility. It's huge. Through this building, some people may just look at it as a building, but really this is your world. This is your galaxy. You are the president. You're the queen. You're everything here. Do you feel responsible for so many people as far as like the artists whom work you displayed on your wall?
No. Art should be accessible to everybody. Art should be part of everybody's life. And I feel it's my role to teach people about art, but also to have them experience it on a different level. I think that we live in such a, as Francis says, such a fast-paced society and things that we forget to experience certain things. And whether it means someone can go out there and visualize or look at photographs, paintings, sculptures, and get a warm feeling. Some people might want to create things themselves. But for me, it's that added dimension that allows people to grow. It's that to think outside the box, to look outside the box. And I think that is so important in today's society. We get so bogged down with all these facts and routines and things. And yeah, in some way, it's my responsibility to teach people, I think, to enjoy, to learn, and to experience and get outside their comfort zone and look at something and think about what they're looking at. And one thing I've found over the last 8-9 months is people are doing that more because they're not bombarded with all this busyness going on. And it's so rewarding to see that. You know, I think it's wonderful. I'm getting lots of young people coming in to the gallery and looking at art. And they're not just walking around and spending 2 seconds actually looking at it. And you can almost feel them try and relate and understand and look beyond just, it's another portrait of someone. You know, and Francis does an amazing job of capturing that essence of a person.
Thanks.
You do. He does, absolutely. You look at any of his photographs, and they're not just static portraits. They're beautiful, evocative, emotional, sometimes very powerful, sometimes very serene images of people that you might meet on the street. And yet they create all these emotions and feelings in people when they look at them. They're beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. You said something about young people, that you love it when they come in here, even from our previous conversation, which was a few days ago. You love it when they come in here. My question for you is this. Because you've been around this business, which was inspired or stumbled across from your father. Mm-hmm. You've been around it since you were a young woman, a young girl, and you've grew up in it. It's all you ever known. When you see young people today coming into your art gallery that you've been running now for the last, 20 something odd years. Mm-hmm. Do you somehow see yourself in these young people?
Sometimes I do. I think what I think about the most is I know what art has given me. And if I can make other people have the joy that I have when I look at things, it warms my heart, right? So I want to engage them and make them look at things. So talking to them, seeing what they see in a photo, seeing what it means to them. And, I think sometimes people are very intimidated when they come into a gallery. They think, well, I don't know anything and I'm going to sound silly asking these questions. Mm-hmm. And really, ultimately, there's nothing wrong with asking those questions. They're not silly. If I don't know everything there is to know about everything, and I'm sure that sometimes to some people my question might be very naive. But that's how we learn and that's how we experience. So I love people to give me their feedback, on the questions. What do you see in that image? Why does that image, what entices you to that? What do you like about that? And I think with Francis's work, you can ask people a lot of those questions in particular because you can read so much in his portrait's eyes, the eyes of the people.
Yeah.
And the expressions on their faces. And sometimes it's harder for people to express what they feel when they look at a landscape or a still life.
Right.
But when you look at people, there is so much out there, so much in them to see. And Francis portrays, you can see so much in his figures. It's beautiful how he creates them.
Francis, we're back to you again.
Thanks,
Your work, as I was telling you earlier on today, a friend of mine, we spend a good while on your website just going through your work. It truly is. And I just don't say it because I want to say it. It truly is fascinating work that you do. It's absolutely amazing. And there are different settings as you go through your website. Everything has its own little fame. It's almost like you're going into these different worlds. Mm-hmm. Is that a conscious decision to have all these things on your website? When people go there, it's like you're in a different world. Every time you leave one room, you go to the next one. It's like an entirely different world.
It's like chapters of your life,
Yes.
It's like a painter or a writer writing a book or creating an image. I'll have a vision of something and say, okay, this theme is going to be my declaration of the divine feminine in nature, because a woman gives life and nature gives us life. Mm-hmm. So I decided to do a series called The Oracles of Nature, which would be celebrating the feminine. And then I would do a series on maybe just very, very powerful portraits, right? Or another series, I was talking with my daughters today about flowers, like when I take photos of flowers, I try to take, not that there's any flowers in this exhibition, but anyone can photograph a flower or a tree or whatever. But if you can bring it more to life than it living itself. And when I was younger doing photography, I started earlier in nature and photography and landscape photography and doing abstract photography, kind of figuring out what I wanted to express. Mm-hmm. And to show the beauty of life, right? Or the pain of life. And like through a ghost series, it's kind of like there's lots of different tensions and emotions in that series. And also, if I was to photograph anyone figuratively, I wanted to photograph them because they are sharing themselves, how they came into the world, but today, and hold them in the highest regard. To it's not overly sexualized or sensualized. It is like a high form of art. It's like looking at the shape of that body in the landscape, or the curve of that neck in a tree, or the clavicle as part of the branch. It's like but looking, like celebrating the body. And I think if we actually looked at the body and looked at the nude per se as like the highest form of art, akin to nature and the symmetry and the beauty in nature, there'd be less problems in the world in regards to sexual tensions or whatever it might be. So I guess I'm kind of getting convoluted here off the train of thought. But yeah, with different doors and different things, like, so people may just want to look at flowers, or maybe someone will want to look at landscapes. I don't have a gallery that's all birds because I'm not a bird photographer, even though I know individuals that are incredible bird photographers that sit in a little blind and hide and wait till the owl with the babies come out or whatever, right? But I think we all have a gift to give the world, a tremendous voice to share. And when we do that, then other voices are woken up in other individuals. And I think that it's a life journey. I don't think that in this instant exactly what your true mission is. I think the mission is continuing in your life and celebrating this life in itself, right? So through the art, I give people on the website, I guess, places to go. If they want to read poetry, they can. If they want to hear some piano, they can. If they just want to look at portraits, they can. If they only like figurative work, at least they can go there. It's still developing, I would say. I'm not sure. Fine-tuned, right? As we grow older, we see things differently.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe when if I'm fortunate enough to reach the age of 80 or 100 or just another 10 years or 20 years, we change. We become new people through the people we meet and that teach us, and we have experiences with, and going through pandemics and become hopefully more compassionate creatures in the world. And maybe my art will be better. Like, I look at my art every day and sometimes it all seems the same. And I want to challenge myself to create something even more powerful than the last, that can maybe reach that one person that will pick up the camera, pick up the brush to paint, pick up the guitar. And I think art is one of these tremendous tools. It's like music transforms art and art transforms music. And it's an incredible healing tool for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I want you to tell me about some of this work. These are your work.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to tell me about some of these, starting with that one over there with the burning, the one... Phoenix. Okay, so in 2011, my house burned down. And it was like something you never imagine happening in your life. You think... Lately, there's been, because of changes in the world, there's been more, extreme fires and people losing their homes. And some people live in areas where there's tornadoes and they never move. They rebuild. And even though their house got taken away by a tornado 3 times, they still build another house, right? Mm-hmm. It's where they want to live, right? But in this instant, I didn't know that this was going to happen to me. And I came home after playing piano at a friend's restaurant to see my house engulfed in flames and fire trucks putting it out, right? So, and I was, when you see that happening, where an axe is going through a window and flames are coming out and everything you own in there, your poetry, your art, outside of the material things, right? Like, material can be replaced, but when you're a creative person and I've traded art in the past for other art, and other artists' work are in there too, not just my work. There's other artists' work. It was really a life-changing moment for me beyond just loss, right? But I said to the firefighters and the medics that were there or whatever, while I was in there in shock, standing, they make you stay there until it burns down, because they're doing an investigation, they're figuring out stuff. They want to make sure they get you somewhere safe
afterwards. They're dealing with a lot, right? They're making sure other people's houses don't burn nearby. And the fire was not started by me. It was an accident. A young boy lit a candle. It fell. It's a big story, bigger than this moment. But after the fire, I pulled things out of the fire that survived the fire, and miraculously, a few things survived and things were taken away. And I make a joke that the fire was my editor, it said, here, you get this and you don't get that. Mm-hmm. Here's a cardboard box of drawings that my daughters did, untouched. Here's some family photos, untouched. Here's everything material you'll have destroyed. Here's these photos wiped away, whatever, right? So what I did is I pulled stuff out of the fire and put them in a suitcase, some of the burnt film negatives. And during COVID, the beginning of COVID, I decided to open up that suitcase. It had been a long while. And I started going through some of the film strips that got affected by the fire, the celluloid strips. And then I was looking at this series, and I had photographed this woman. She's an artist herself. Today, she does scenes, backgrounds for movies and CGI, and a very famous photographer today in her own right. But at one point, she was a model and figuring out what she wanted to do with her life, and she had posed for me. And I realized this image, the eyes coming through this burnt, and I said, this is my Phoenix image. After the fire, I wrote poetry because when you see your roof removed from your house and birds flying, and there's all these incredible stories that came from the fire that's beyond any art I could ever make. The experience of your life, no matter what you try to write about or what you create, the experience you have personally is bigger than anything you can create out of that experience. Mm-hmm. But I decided in this exhibition to show it for the first time, this image. Because, I feel I've grown past it. You can't carry sadness or grief or tremendous things or the great joy you have in your life, you carry your whole life. But sometimes it's important to let things go. But now, to me, it's become this beautiful piece of art that it seems fitting at this time to share it. And I haven't told, actually, the individual I photographed that this image is her yet. I was planning to let her know soon. I just haven't spoken to her in several years. But it's like creating art from the fire created art with me. It's sort of like when I was in New York, I met a famous drummer named Elvin Jones. I met him randomly. It's like this randomness of life, things that happen. And I bought 3 postcards to send to friends. Whenever I travel, I would buy a postcard, a photographic postcard of somebody taken by somebody else, of someone that I thought was it was Billie Holiday or some sort of individual, and I'd write where I am on what street, or I'm having coffee somewhere, a glass of wine. And I ended up going to a jazz club that night, and it was Elvin. It was him with his kids playing, and I had no idea, right? And I was writing the postcard, and I looked at him. It's like a young version of him. And I go, hey. He's like, oh, and he pulled me to his table. We talked all night, and then he wrote on the back of the postcard before I wrote on it, "Peace and love, Francis." And I was like, wow. And in my fire, when everything burned in my kitchen, on the fridge itself was just his postcard sitting there. And I was like, why did that survive? Because I had this beautiful moment with him, right? And some things are taken away and some things aren't, right?
Wow.
So then you wonder why. And I have these incredible stories from the fire that I could do I've written some poems and so, like I said, but you can't explain it to the depth of, I think everything is how we interpret personally, and how I said earlier, how we're all storytellers of our experience. And this helps us have a greater grasp on enjoying life here. It's by sharing depth with each other, right? So the fire taught me, even though it was a very tragic thing, I lost my cat. No one died, which is very fortunate, material things. And I started a new life and started taking photographs again, and had some that survived and some didn't, right? But I just started again and made new art, and was reborn again with new eyes. And I still had my old eyes, but I had a different way of seeing, where now if anything breaks in front of me, it doesn't matter,
Was it hard to pick up the camera again?
It was weird because, when I lost all my photo equipment, I didn't want to take photos right away. I did some poetry. First thing I did is I bought myself a hat, the hat I'm wearing, because I lost my other hat in the fire. It was just a gift to myself because all my clothes are gone. All I had was this bag of poetry and no hat and my outfit. And I was like, that's what I got. That's all I have left, right? Until I see what survived the fire, right? So I went and got myself a new hat just to make myself feel like I have my hat, a different hat. What was the question again? Sorry, I got carried away in the thought of something.
We were talking about Phoenix.
Was it hard to...
pick up the camera again.
Yeah.
Yes.
I looked, it appeared, the camera, all the camera equipment I lost, just imagine all the equipment you have here, say taken away from you for some reason, hopefully never happens. And all of a sudden, a week later, someone is selling the same equipment for like $50. And I just happened to find in the newspaper that someone is selling this on Stephen Ave, and I go meet them because they're not using it anymore. And it was just enough, like a few lenses and the camera I had in a case to start again without spending a lot of money because I didn't have insurance or anything for the fire, which you should get fire insurance. And I just started again. The first thing I did was do a self-portrait of myself in the fire, the house after the fire with some burnt art. And then if I had a dream, I would go into the house and take some photos of some of the remains before they bulldozed it down, right, and dug it up. And I went off to Denver and I had some exhibitions and I took what survived and I made a book and just kept going. And then things really started happening for me on a different level. Was asked to show more shows, but I didn't tell people that, I had a fire, I just moved forward, right? I kind of like, what's next? And I think life presents challenges to you that you're able to endure.
Yeah.
Not so much absolutely to vanquish you. It's how you have to look at it and have the courage to get through it. And some people go through so much more than me just having a house fire that I wouldn't even be able to understand how to endure.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate that I'm right here having a podcast. I have a beautiful art show. Maybe someone will come in and see a piece of work and maybe they'll want to be a photographer. Maybe they'll want to make a movie. Maybe they'll want to write a poem. Maybe they'll just learn something new about themselves. Or maybe they'll learn nothing at all or see nothing at all, but that's personal. It's weird. It's when you share yourself so personally like this. It's like we were talking earlier about poetry. It's like it comes from you, right? And you give it away. It's like, and that's how art should be. It's like it's part of you and you give it away. It's sort of like you give it to the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Romana, you basically displayed, over 35 contemporary work of artists, Canadian artists, here. And when you think about where you've been and how far you've come with the art gallery and what you do here for this community, describe to me the process of artists getting a hold of you, or how do you even select which art that you're going to display? Describe that process for me.
Well, because I grew up in with an art background and exposure, I got to know a lot of artists to begin with. But for me, choosing the artists that I represent has a lot of different factors. One thing is it has to say something to me. It has to create emotion. It has to be something that really captivates me. And I think that's what great art is that it brings out that emotion that whether it's you're searching for something, you ask questions, or whether it answers questions for you, the fact that it makes you think, the fact that it challenges what you believe or don't believe, to me, that's what makes great art. And so when I look for artists' work, it has to really have some of those integral components to it. And I believe that, art is a way of people expressing things that they don't always necessarily express through verbal ways. Artists choose the visual arts or something tactile like sculpture, clay, whatever medium they use. Some people choose dance to express things. Some people choose literature, writing to express things. I think, though, people should do more of that to express things. We get all bottled up and believe that we should behave a certain way, have certain things. And I think, you also have to be able to communicate, express, show what is in your heart, experience, let other people see what's in there, what you want to communicate. And for true artists, that's the way they communicate. Some people will just talk, but others need to say it in a painting or in a photograph or in a poem or in a book. And I think it's wonderful that we have those and that we can, hopefully, those people can share it with us. I think also that we have to have our eyes open. Sometimes not enough people have their eyes open. So I always had this one saying is, someone could be sitting under a coconut, and if a bag of gold fell down in front of their feet or something beautiful fell at their feet, they wouldn't notice it because the coconut dropped on their head and knocked them out, right? It's this idea that we have to open up. We can't just shut ourselves off from something out there. And if we do that, we allow other things to, I've had lots of experiences where I've been trying to search for something or find something, and if you're not looking for it, it's never gonna be there because you've shut yourself off to that coming your way. And I think art is something that is much easier for people to understand.
Yeah.
If they just, without feeling intimidated. It shouldn't be intimidating. Art should never be intimidating. It should be there for people to take whatever they can from it in terms of experience, in terms of some kind of message,
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you absolutely. I think what you said, it's an important conversation. This is an important conversation, and people need to hear it. And some people probably already, their mind already think alongside probably with some of the things that's been discussed here, but it's having that overall hearing it from someone else, hearing it from a professional who's in that world, who live that life every day, I think it's reassuring for a lot of people. So another question for you: when did you know that a business like this could make money for you and support you? And the same question is going to go for you as well.
When did I know? For me, it wasn't necessarily. I grew up in it, so I knew. My family had a successful business. So for me to do this was more something I had to do, I can't say there's one time where I says, "Woohoo!" I do it because I love it, and I think when you love something, some of that comes your way. I don't think it's a matter of that's what I'm looking for, so this is what I'm going to do. I think when you love what you do and you give it your all, you get rewards coming your way. And that can translate into many ways, not just as financial success, right? And for me, it's a combination of a lot of things that I love to do. And it's not just based on it's a successful business, but it's a rewarding business. Yeah.
Yeah, the aspect of the financial gain from art is a weird question because artists need to eat and artists need to have shelter and materials. I think that it's important for an artist to realize that if you dedicate your heart and the depth and breadth of your vision into something and you really give it your all, then it will happen. If you're not giving it at all, your all, it won't happen. And the reward for me, yes, money helps and it's a tool. I can buy more film, I can buy food, and when I eat that bowl of soup, it tastes better because my art bought that soup. And I've done jobs where, I've dug trenches in the past or planted trees or worked as a nanny or, hard work, labor jobs, roofed a house or painted a fence or, building with your hands and working hard and crazy weather. But when you eat the fruits from your imagination, it's the most delicious meal you've ever had. And when you share that meal, like break that bread or share that soup, it's even more magical. Today I had an experience where one of the images in my show is in a book that I did, a little small edition book. And the woman that I photographed, she's also a painter and a poet. I put her image in the back of the book to celebrate this. She will be probably the cover of the next book. But she showed it to her mother and father, and they want to send a book to her grandfather. And just getting that message today, and I'm going to make a special print to put in the book for the grandfather of her. It's like that's the reason for all of that art to me. Isn't necessarily the book and all the images in the book. It's that moment where he sees his granddaughter, that one image, and she's in a book. And he can show his friends, this is my granddaughter. And she's an artist. It's not like I'm the artist. It's she's the artist. And that to me is my reward.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah, I remembered, you talk about hard work. I mean, I'm a safety guy in the oil field. Whenever I have time to go out there and work and do something, that's what I do. But you're absolutely right. And what you said about when you actually get something back from this is much more rewarding than anything else because you just put so much into it. So this is coming to the end of this podcast, of this episode. And I know there's so many things that we're leaving out, didn't get into, but there are a few essential things that I feel like has to be touched upon before this episode conclude itself. And those things I will leave you guys to decide, because this is your world. I am a guest in it today and hopefully forever after now. But for now, everyone else watching it is a guest as well. So you all need to let us know, and let me know, what is it that there's something out there that you would like to highlight about the podcast, and about, not about the podcast, but about what you do, about your gallery, about your photography and things of that nature.
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for allowing us to share this with you. I'm delighted to be part of this podcast, and I've enjoyed our talks immensely and things, and I've enjoyed this podcast immensely. The gallery is located at 1332 9th Avenue Southeast in the area of Inglewood. It's a great area. Lots of unique shops and things, and lots of local proprietor-run businesses, and I'm a big proponent of support local. We showcase artists from across Canada, as well as do some of the historical aspects of art across Canada. So, and we're open Tuesdays to Fridays, 10 till 5:30, Saturdays, 10 to 5, and Sundays from usually about noon to 4.
How do you, there'll be a lot of people who watch this, maybe it's tomorrow, day after, a year from now, but when they do watch it, they will probably be curious as to, well, how do I decide if this art is going to look good in my living room, or if that piece there is what I really want? So describe that client and art gallery relationship when it comes to buying on art, like that whole process.
Well, yeah. So I feel, everybody should be able to envision artwork in their home. And if that means that they have to try it out at home, we allow our clients to try those paintings at home. So we will, especially if it's a bigger piece, they can take it home on approval, spend a few days with it before they make their final decision on something. And I think sometimes you need that comfort of sitting, relaxing, looking at something to make that ultimate decision. And we can deliver it to you. We can hang it in your home. And there's no obligation for that. If you decide, no, it doesn't work.
And it's an easy process.
We'll just come pick it up again. Yeah. And so, yes, absolutely. Because we ultimately are there to help you find that piece that speaks to you, that makes you feel good about it. And the fact that, it's a prominent artist that's highly regarded, or an up-and-coming artist that we feel strongly about will be acknowledged in the future as an up-and-comer and prominent artist, Yeah, so we want you to feel comfortable with it. Absolutely, and that's one way. And if it takes years, we've had people that have tried pieces over the years, and finally they choose something. So it's not something that might happen overnight. It might take a few tries of trying pieces on approval, and that's all fine.
Yeah. Is it based on like a trust system? Or like what do they have to do? Do they kind of...
So we get deposit? Your address, your contact information, and your credit card information. But we don't, we won't process it until we know. And that way you just enjoy and feel comfortable on if that's something you want to do. And if not, you bring the piece back or we come and pick it up from you.
Okay, here's a very biased question. Do you have any favorite artist?
You know, there's a lot of artists out there, and they each bring something a little different forward because we are all unique people and we all share our own experiences and things through our art or through what we do. And so can I say that there's one artist out there that just really, no. And what one artist might say to you might not resonate as well as what another artist is. What I can say is, you know, I've had the occasional photograph of artists here, but Francis has, every time I see something else he's done, I am absolutely captivated. And I believe Francis is a top quality, top-notch, amazing photographer. And
Thanks.
Calgary should be very proud to have him. Canada should be proud. He really does. He gives those photographs life that I haven't seen created by many photographers, and I've seen a lot of photography work over the years.
It's all my mom. I'm telling you, my mom. It's my mom.
Your mother is
and
My mom has the sensitivity. She gave it to me, my emotional intelligence. So it's like without her, I'd be like in jail because my dad or something, you know. You know, my dad's cool, you know. I'd just be getting out of jail. You'd have to do the podcast.
do the podcast behind
Because my
bars.
mom, I have an art show.
Yeah.
And I have a little bit. I mean, I did some photography when I was younger and stuff, but you know, I can't even go there. Francis keeps saying we have to go out and do some photography, and I got to dust off my camera soon.
I
so
told
I'm going
her
to hold
the same thing. I told her the same thing. But yeah, so the table's turned to you, Francis.
And then I'll have a gallery one day and I'll show her work.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
I think it's important for people to invest in art. Like, you know, people invest in stocks or invest in vehicles or material things, but art is one of these magical things. And I'm not saying just buy my art. Invest in any young artist you see because it gives them confidence to continue. Like you say, oh, I like that enough to give you money for it. Even if it's $10, $50, $1,000, whatever it is. They'll take that money. It gives them like purpose, right? And meaning in their lives. The money is a tool.
Acknowledgement.
Right? Yeah, it's acknowledgement. And then when you have that art in your home, it's part of your family, right? And then as you get older, that's part of your story of your life and you pass it in your family, down the family. And it's like this Genesis thing. That's this thing that happens, right? Where years and years from now, forget Antique Roadshow or any of those things. It's like, this was great-grandfather's painting he bought at this gallery back when. Why did he buy that? And you find some old letter or something. And it's like really beautiful story. Or maybe you don't know the story, but then you appreciate it in a different way. But you kind of look at it with your grandfather's eyes or whatever eyes. And I think this is kind of part of our storytelling and our narrative too, is art has that thing to express, you know, time and place or emotions, or say a landscape where people fell in love, or somewhere where they went on a, you know, they found something within themselves, or they saw something. It could be the most abstract thing in the world, but all of a sudden it becomes the most real thing in the world to them. So the question about money, was it money or was it about, I'm sorry, I got caught off my brain. It just goes like that. It just snaps.
No, it was about informing, educating me of things that I probably didn't even think about, but something that you wanted to share regarding.
I just think to follow your passions, but remember to mentor other people. Take time in your life where it's not just about you. Always take a piece of your time to give to somebody else purely without any want, desire, or need. And I think it's really important to do that as human beings, is to take time for other people. You don't have to give them everything you have, but give them a piece of the true aspect of yourself. And I think that's important.
That acknowledgement can mean so much to a young artist.
Yeah.
To anyone,
to anybody,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, sometimes those things are much more important than any kind of financial benefit that you could gain from something.
Yeah.
I had a young
sure.
girl save up for a small piece of art. Now she's an art teacher. She's teaching other kids. She bought it when she was a little girl, right? That's how old I'm getting, right? Now she's teaching kids. And those kids probably are teaching kids now too. Like, and that's what it's about, is like being teachers for each other too, right? And I had no idea that this piece of art that I made would inspire that woman to become an art teacher. And then now she's sharing her wisdom, and all I did was share a little piece of art. But that's a story for me, and it's a gift to me in my life. Like I said earlier, about like these little silent things you got to pay attention to in your life, that there's a lot of small blessings in this world, even in a pandemic. You kind of got to look, even though you're not with everybody that you love, you can't see everyone you love. Everyone's looking at screens. Remember these small moments you do get to have with people, even at a distance, It's really important. And remember like where you were and where we will be, but pay attention to exactly where you are.
I couldn't agree more. Just one final thing, the pandemic has been sort of like a thing that's filled with surprises, and everyone you talk to has a very different experience with the pandemic. I was out last night with a couple who have had the exact opposite. For them, business is booming for them. Has the pandemic helped your business? How has the pandemic helped your business in any way or hurt it? And yeah.
Well, with the pandemic, a lot of people have been hurt financially by it. So in some ways, it has hurt it for sure. But at the same time, what I've noticed is, and we mentioned this earlier, is I'm seeing a lot of younger people, and they're taking the time more to look at the art, and they're spending more time engaging in it. And hence they're also spending time, what are my stocks doing? They've fallen down here, And I've often said to people, art is a good way to, not put all your eggs in one basket, And if you choose a gallery that has a good, solid reputation, and you learn about the artist, you learn about where they show, where they've shown, what collections they're in and things, where they've been reproduced, who's done the shows. That all helps to solidify that artist's mark on him and on art in the art world. And so his CV is very important. And also it also sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, come on.
Come on in, sorry. We're just doing a podcast. Okay. Anyway, so I often say, don't keep your eggs all in one basket, spread it out. And, if you go to those good galleries that represent solid artists with good reputations, then, it's another way to put your eggs in a different basket. And at the same time, you get to enjoy it as well.
Wonderful.
Right? And remember whatever it reminds you of, or the emotions it evokes in you when you look at it. And that's what art's about too.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it harder now to photograph people with the pandemic?
Yeah, I find it, because I like to work one-on-one with individuals.
Okay.
But I think the pandemic has created a new renaissance in art, where people have looked more inside of themselves and had time to contemplate and to deal with a tremendous amount of emotion and challenges. And I think that creates powerful thought and creativity. For me, I just have to redesign how I am as an artist. Like I'm usually inside. Artists are kind of inside creating anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a huge shift in being inside versus outside. The socializing I miss. I miss not being able to be around people I care about, seeing my mom and dad, giving them a hug, or a friend and just giving friends a hug or things like that. I miss those things. But as an artist, you just kind of redefine yourself a different way, write poetry, organize your life better so that when things change, you can come out renewed and like with a new way outlook in your life, right? Don't look at it as like, oh, look at this, it's crushing me and this is the end of my career or the end of my business. You just have to redesign the challenges that you have and look at it differently. And like I said, I think for artists, it's like a new renaissance is going to be with literature and music and ways that we express. People have to find ways to express, so they will create a different language. They'll create a different way through different technologies. They'll create a different way of making their way in the world, right? So I think it's just challenging yourself with the challenges, right? So, I mean, yeah, I miss photographing people one-on-one. When the weather gets better, I can do that outside, but as things change and hopefully there's less restrictions, I can perhaps do more. But I have other work I've never shared. So I get to visit some older work and think about the work I've created and write more poetry or share a different depth with other artists or other people on a different level than just with my camera.
Thank you. Is there anything else you guys would like to add that maybe you want to?
No, I just wanted to thank you for choosing me as part of your podcast. And I'd like to connect you to some other tremendous artists that I think will be really important for you to meet.
Thank you.
And for your viewers or listeners to embrace that I've had the honor of meeting as an artist and meeting another artist. And that way you can keep sharing these stories, right? That's important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I just feel very blessed to have this moment with both of you today.
Yeah.
So thanks.
So one last thing. Here's what I'm drawing from this. Your mother got you into photography by giving you a camera. Mm-hmm. Your father got you to ultimately open a huge art gallery by stumbling across a piece of art that changed his life, which is Emily E. Carr work. If you could say one thing to these people right now, what would you say to them?
To my father?
Your father.
My father. My dad was an amazing man, and I just hope that he realizes what he gave me and to thank him for those things. The knowledge base, the ability to strive for things, to how to look at things, all those things that he taught me throughout my life. And there isn't one little bit. There's hundreds of little moments that make up what I've learned from him. I can't begin to say, but, thank him for everything,
I just say give thanks in your life and tell people you love them, ultimately, and just appreciate the moment you're in. I mean, my mom is still here with me, right? And I talked to her today briefly. I mean, I feel I'm closer to my mother now than I was years ago, but she's getting on in age. As I took her photograph at some point, and one of my father as well. But I sent her a photo of the podcast before it happened, It's just that moment. So I'm thankful that I can do that, and she sees that I'm still continuing, and I don't think she ever thought that giving me a camera would... parents want their children to survive and succeed, right? Like to keep going and to just do the right thing. So, and learn from mistakes and things like that. So I think my mom is probably happy that I'm having an exhibition. She can't come to it because she's elderly and won't be able to make it. But she gets to see behind the scenes through Instagram, or I'll send her the podcast later.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
She won't watch a really old movie or a Western or something. She'll have to watch the podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
Or listen to the podcast.
Yeah, she listen to it when
I'll probably have to set it up so she can hear it or whatever. Like I have to help her, give her some tech support in between.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, absolutely. Well, guys, I want to thank you all for coming on the podcast and, giving this platform some lights. And I just want to thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Francis, your work speak for itself. It's incredible. You photograph some of my favorite people. Romana, what can I say? Like, this art gallery is just amazing. And I know there's so many stories have come through here, and there will be more stories coming through here. I just want to say that I'm blessed enough to be a part of it and be a part of this moment. And thank you all for coming. And I just want to quickly remind anyone who, if this is your first time tuning into 18th Avenue Podcast.com, it is just a platform that is giving love to the community that I live in. There are many podcasts out there. There aren't enough podcasts out there that talk about the local people and their businesses and their life and their stories. And I wanted to make sure that they had a place that they could all just sort of like meet and share their stories and speak from the heart. And I think we've been able to do that here on this particular episode. So thank you all for watching once again. And till next time, till next week, we will see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rico, very much.